Emma, how would you sum up the year overall in Boston in women's sports?
It was a huge year for women's sports in Boston. You know, you talk about momentum of women's sports across the country, and that you certainly saw that here locally in Boston. You start off the year with the women's college beanpot at TD Garden. A huge game for women's college hockey there. They have 13,000 fans in attendance at the TD Garden. Just a huge game, broke records for attendance for women's hockey. And then you look at the Boston Fleet. Last season was their second season in the PWHL. They sort of flamed out there at the end of the year, lost 5 of their last 6 and got eliminated from the playoffs with an 8-1 loss to Minnesota in the final game of the year. Coach Courtney Kessel leaves in the offseason, and they hire a brand new coaching staff led by Chris Spar, who was a longtime assistant in men's hockey, and he totally turns around the team. They're 4-0 to start the season after a huge roster overhaul in the offseason, and they're looking really good to start the year.
Emma, tell me more about the Fleet and just the Professional Women's Hockey League in general. I think they're in their 3rd year now. Where do you see this league taking off now?
They've had a lot of success in the first 2 and some years of the league's existence. The Boston Fleet, like I said, are off to a really hot start. They've had a lot of success in the league. They made the Walter Cup final their first season. And it's just been really great to see the increased number of fans, the growing number of fans at all their games this year.
And I believe most of the players are probably going to be playing in the Olympics in February. So that, I would think, would be a great platform for the league also, and for the women to get their names out there and get some publicity. Also, a big year for women's sports in soccer. Tell me about that, Emma.
Yeah, so the Boston Legacy FC will start up as part of the NWSL in March. It'll be their first season in the league. A huge, exciting return of women's soccer to the Boston area. We had the Boston Breakers here for a while that folded, but now are sort of being resurrected. Boston women's soccer is being resurrected through the Legacy. After this season, they'll play at Gillette Stadium. They're going to play at a renovated White Stadium, which will be a huge, huge boost for women's soccer in the area.
Yeah, no question. And then can't forget, probably the biggest event was when Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever played the Connecticut Sun at TD Garden. What was that event like?
It's always a huge deal when Caitlin Clark comes to town, but a phenomenal game of basketball between the Indiana Fever and the Connecticut Sun at TD Garden. It's the 2nd year in a row that the Sun have sold out the Garden, and it brought a lot of momentum for women's basketball in Boston. There's a lot of calls for a team coming here, whether it's the Sun playing more games at the Garden or getting a permanent team in Boston. A lot of women's sports fans and women's basketball fans have come forward. Even our governor, Healy, is on board for having a women's basketball team in Boston.
Yeah, it blows my mind, Emma. We got about 30 seconds here, but why is there a team in Connecticut, and why does Boston, of all cities, not have a women WNBA team?
Well, that's what people are saying. There's a lot of chatter about why this is in a small market when it could be in this huge market. And even Sadia Rivers, who plays for the Connecticut Sun, said something to that degree when we were talking at the game in TD Garden this year.
Yeah, it's a great sports town, obviously Boston, and a great women's sports town. So to me, it's a huge opportunity loss for the NBA